After I spent days preparing a family meal, my daughter-in-law opened the door, took one smell and said, "We don't eat peasant food." My grandkids watched as she pushed the dishes into the trash. My son said, "She's just used to better now." I quietly collected my coat. What they didn't know was that the bank transfer I cancelled that morning would. "We don't eat peasant food." Those 4 words hit me like a slap across the face. I was standing in my own kitchen doorway, dish towel still in my hands, the smell of slow-braised pork and roasted garlic filling every corner of the room. 3 days, 3 full days I had spent on that meal, and Elise Petrov, my son's wife, stood there wrinkling her perfect nose like I had cooked garbage. I watched her lift the lid off my ceramic pot. She leaned in barely, then recoiled as if the steam itself had offended her. Then, with one sharp motion, she tipped the entire tray into the trash bin beside the counter. The clatter of it, the hard, ringing crash of ceramic hitting metal, echoed through the kitchen and out into the hallway where my grandchildren stood watching in silence. Mila, 9 years old, had her hands clasped in front of her. Lucas, 6, kept looking between me and his mother like he was trying to understand something too large for him to hold. I didn't give them anything to read on my face. I wouldn't. "She's just used to better now," Daniel said, not meeting my eyes. He said it the way a man says something he has rehearsed, flat, quick, already retreating from the sentence before it finished landing. "I am Lydia Petrov. I am 67 years old. I was born in a village where winter lasted 8 months and meat was a Sunday luxury. I built everything I have from nothing, not from comfort, not from inheritance, but from work and silence and swallowing my pride every time the world asked me to. My love has always lived in labor, in meals cooked slowly over hours, in sacrifices made without announcement, in money given quietly and never mentioned again. That is who I am, and it is also my greatest flaw. I keep score, I pretend not to. I smile and say it is nothing, it is fine, I do not need thanks. But inside I record everything. Every dismissal, every casual cruelty, every moment I was made to feel small by people who were only standing tall because I had knelt down to lift them. I am patient until I am not, and when that patience breaks, I do not scream, I do not cry, I dismantle. I removed my coat from the hook beside the door slowly, carefully, the way you move when you know everyone is watching, and you refuse to give them the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. I walked out into the cold without another word. The autumn air was sharp and grey. My hands had stopped shaking by the time I reached the end of the walkway. I did not look back at the house. I had bought that house. The mortgage was in my name. Daniel had moved in 2 years ago while the paperwork for their new home was being finalized. The new home I had agreed to help fund with a wire transfer of $480,000. The down payment. The key to the next chapter of their curated, polished, better-than-peasant life. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I already knew what it said before I looked at it. I had made the call that morning before I started cooking, before I had let myself hope that this dinner would be a bridge between us. The message read, "Transfer cancelled." I put the phone back in my pocket and kept walking. They did not know yet. But I did. I did not cry that night, not once. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I did not drink, and I let the silence do what silence does. It peeled back the surface of things and showed me what was underneath. What was underneath was not grief, though it wore grief's clothing for a while. What was underneath was something much harder. It was clarity. I had been building a case for years without knowing it. Every time Daniel shrugged off one of Elise's comments, every family dinner where she found a reason to leave early, every holiday gift she accepted with the polite, withering smile people reserve for things they planned to throw away. Every time the children were kept from me a little longer than last time, the visits growing shorter, the phone calls more formal. I had been watching all of it happen and telling myself it was nothing. It was fine, families adjust, people are complicated, give it time. 3 days of cooking had been my way of trying one more time to reach her, to reach them both. She threw it in the trash. I opened my laptop and began making calls. "Victor," I said when my attorney picked up after the second ring, "I need you to pull the documents on the Northfield property. Everything with Daniel's name attached. I want to see what I signed and what I didn't." "Lydia, it's nearly 9 o'clock, he said. "I know what time it is, pull the documents." A pause, then "I'll have them to you by morning." Victor Sobel had been my attorney for 22 years. He knew my voice. He knew when I was asking and when I was telling. He had seen me navigate worse than this, the years after my husband passed, the business disputes, the contract that nearly swallowed my savings in my late 50s. He pulled the documents. I sat with them until 2 in the morning. I read every line. My flaw showed itself in those hours, sitting alone with papers and cold tea. I did not just want to protect myself financially. I wanted them to feel what I had felt in that kitchen, the particular humiliation of having your most sincere offering dismissed like refuse. I wanted Elise to stand in a doorway somewhere and feel small. I wanted Daniel to understand that comfort is not the same as strength, and that everything he had taken for granted had a spine beneath it. My obsession with precision, with making the consequence exactly fit the offense, was not clean strategy. It was wounded pride wearing the mask of logic. I knew that about myself even as I kept going. By morning I had a full picture. The house was still in my name. Daniel's business, the small import firm he ran that he described to everyone as self-made, had been seeded with $200,000 of my money, structured as a conditional investment, not a gift. I had done it that way on Victor's advice years ago, never imagining I would need the condition to matter. The conditions required the business to remain transparent and collaborative with my investment interests. Daniel had stopped sending me reports 18 months ago. He had been technically in breach for over a year. "You're certain you want to move on all of this?" Victor asked when we met the next afternoon. "I'm certain," I said. "Lydia, once you start pulling threads, the whole garment comes apart. Are you prepared for what that means for your relationship with Daniel, with the children?" I looked at him across the desk. He watched her throw my food in the trash and told me she was used to better. "Are you asking me if I've thought about my relationship with that man?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "I'll draw up the notices." My flaw almost derailed me twice in those 2 weeks. The first time was when Daniel called. He called twice the first day, then 4 more times the next. I sat with my phone in my hand and watched his name appear on the screen, and I felt something hot and dangerous move through me. Not love exactly, but its complicated shadow. The urge to answer, to let him explain. To let the version of myself that had cut his crusts off his bread for 15 years win out over the version, sitting in this chair with documents on the table. I put the phone face down and walked to the window instead. I stood there until the feeling passed. Second time was worse. I drove past the street one evening without meaning to, old habit. The route ran through memory before it ran through decision, and I saw the lights on in the house, and through the front window I could see the small shape of Lucas on the couch, his feet tucked under him the way he always sat, watching something on the television. He was wearing the blue sweater I had bought him for his birthday in March. My chest did something complicated that I did not have a clean name for. I drove home without stopping. I told myself this was not about the children. I told myself they would be fine, that children are resilient, that what I was doing was a correction, not a demolition. I half believed it. My pride would not let me believe all of it. But I kept going because to stop halfway, to pull back after they had already begun to feel the pressure of changed circumstances, that would have been cruelty without purpose. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it completely. Elise had already started making calls of her own. I heard through a mutual acquaintance. A woman named Renata who moved in the same social circles Elise had been carefully cultivating, that Elise had gone to 2 separate lenders asking about bridging loans. The deal on their new home was in a holding pattern. The sellers were losing patience. The realtor had sent 2 formal extension requests. Each one was met with my silence, because the down payment was gone, and Daniel had not yet told anyone why, possibly because he did not fully understand why yet himself. "She's been telling people the bank made an error," Renata told me over coffee, watching me carefully for a reaction. "Banks do make errors," I said. Renata studied me. "You look well, Lydia." "Thank you," I said. "I've been sleeping better." He came on a Thursday evening, just after dark. I heard his car in the drive before I saw it. Daniel's engine has always had a particular sound, slightly rough on the right side, something he kept meaning to fix. I had known this visit was coming for days. I had prepared myself for it the way you prepare for weather, not with expectation of any specific form, but with full understanding that something significant was on its way. I opened the door before he knocked. He looked terrible, not dramatically terrible. Daniel would never allow that, but in the way of a man who had been sleeping badly and eating worse, and holding a great many things together through sheer will. His shirt was slightly wrong, the collar uneven. His eyes had the particular flatness of someone who has been rehearsing a conversation, so long the words have stopped feeling real. "Mom," he said. "Come in," I said. I did not offer tea. I walked to the sitting room and sat in the chair nearest the window. He sat on the couch across from me, on the edge of it, elbows on his knees. "I've been trying to reach you," he said. "I know," I said. "You haven't answered." "No." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Mom, please, we need to talk about what's happening. The house deal is in trouble. The transfer didn't go through and we don't understand. The bank said there was a cancellation order, but that doesn't make sense because you said." "I cancelled it," I said. He went still. He stopped, started again. "You cancelled the transfer." "Yes." "When?" "The morning I cooked the meal. I said. I had already sent the cancellation before I started the broth. Daniel stared at me. Something moved across his face, confusion first, then something that was not quite anger but was related to it. Mom, why would you? That's almost $500,000. We signed contracts. The sellers. I know what was signed, I said. Then why? He pressed his hands flat on his knees. Is this about what happened at dinner? Because I told you Elise didn't mean. She meant every word, I said, and so did you. I didn't say anything. Exactly. The silence between us was not empty. It was full of things we had both been storing for a long time, the way a house stores cold inside its walls even in summer. I gave you everything, I said. And I'm grateful, No, I said, you were comfortable. There is a difference. Grateful people notice what they have. Comfortable people stop seeing it. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Then I heard the front door. I had not given her a key. I had never given her a key, but Daniel must have left it unlocked, or she had followed him without telling him, because Elise walked into my sitting room like she owned the floor beneath her feet. She was dressed carefully. She was always dressed carefully, her hair in place, her expression controlled in that particular way of hers that she mistook for dignity. We need to resolve this, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't invite you here. I'm Daniel's wife. And he is my son. Neither of those things gives you the right to walk into my home without being asked. She held my gaze. We just need the transfer reinstated. Whatever disagreement we're having, this is a financial matter and it doesn't have to be personal, I said. Yes, she said, exactly, it doesn't have to be personal. I smiled then. I had not smiled at either of them since they walked in, and I could see the effect of it, not warmth, but something sharper. Exactly, I said. I stood and walked to the dining table where I had placed the folder that morning. I had arranged the documents in order, the property deed, the business investment contract with its conditions, the wire cancellation confirmation, the breach of contract notice Victor had drafted. I set the folder on the table and opened it. What is that? Daniel said, standing now moving toward me. Paperwork, I said. Yours, mine, the parts of our arrangement that exist on paper rather than assumption. Elise had moved closer too. She looked at the documents with the controlled attention of someone doing rapid calculations. I watched her eyes move across the pages, and I watched the moment the calculation changed. The moment she understood this was not one problem but several. This is the house title, Daniel said. Yes, I said, still in my name, as it has been since I bought it. We were going to, you said we could. I said many things, I said. I also put none of them in writing, which is my fault. I will own that, but the house remains mine until I decide otherwise, and I have decided otherwise than I originally planned. What does that mean? Daniel's voice had gone very flat, very careful. I pointed to the second document. This is the investment contract for your business. $200,000 conditional. The conditions required quarterly reporting. You stopped sending reports 18 months ago. Victor has sent formal notice of breach. You have 30 days to respond before I pursue recovery. Elise made a sound, not a word, just a sound, sharp and involuntary, that she immediately sealed back up behind her composed expression. Mom, Daniel said, and the word came out stripped of everything except shock. You can't, we have employees. There are people who depend on. Then you should have sent the reports, I said. I didn't think, he stopped. His jaw tightened. I didn't think you would ever actually. I thought it was just a formality. You thought it was peasant paperwork, I said. Something to be tolerated and then ignored. The words landed. I watched them land. Daniel flinched like I had struck him. Elise went very still. That's not fair, Daniel said. Your wife threw 3 days of my labor in the trash and told me I cooked peasant food, I said. You stood there and told me she was used to better, in my own house, in front of my grandchildren, and now you are explaining to me what is fair. Elise was stressed. Elise was contemptuous, I said. She has always been contemptuous. Of where you came from, of what I gave you, of everything that did not fit her idea of the life she wanted to be living. And you let her. You have been letting her for years because it was easier than standing up straight. Daniel's face had gone through several things in quick succession. Shame, anger, the particular look of a man being held to account for something he has known was coming and hoped to outrun. He turned to Elise. Say something, he said. Elise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This is not the place." "Say something to her," he said. "Say what you should have said last week." Elise's composure fractured, just slightly at the edges. "Daniel, this is not." "She cooked for 3 days," he said, his voice cracking. 3 days, Elise, and you threw it in the trash in front of her and you said—" He stopped, pressed his fingers to his eyes. "You said we don't eat peasant food, and I just stood there." The room was very quiet. "I was overwhelmed," Elise said. "The house, the timeline, the—" "Stop," I said. They both looked at me. "I don't want an explanation," I said. "I want you to understand something. You came here today because you need something from me. You have always come to me when you needed something, and I have always given it because that is what I do. That is the flaw in me. I give and I tell myself I don't need thanks, and then I keep score of every moment I was taken for granted, and I say nothing until I have enough to act. That is not clean. I know that about myself." I closed the folder. "But today I am acting," I said. "The transfer is not coming. The house you are living in will be listed for sale within 60 days. I have already spoken with an agent. Victor's notice about the business investment stands. If you want to discuss a repayment arrangement, you will need to go through him." "Mom," Daniel's voice broke on the word. Not anger now, something older and rower than anger. "You're going to sell the house with the kids, with Mila and Lucas. You will find somewhere else to live," I said. "You are 42 years old and your wife's income alone is more than what I earned in my best year. You will be fine." "This isn't," he pressed his hand to his chest. "You're burning everything. The house, the business, what is left after this, what do we have left?" "The same thing I had when I started," I said. "Yourself, it will be enough if you use it correctly." Elise picked up her bag from the chair where she had set it. Her hands were steady, but her face was not. Something in her expression had changed. The careful architecture of contempt had come apart, and what was underneath it was not what I expected. It was fear. Old fear. The fear of someone who has always been one financial reversal away from the life they were trying to leave behind, and who has been building walls of status and dismissal to keep that fear from showing. It did not make me soft toward her, but I noted it. "We'll talk to Victor," she said, addressing the room rather than me. "Yes," I said, "you will." They left. I heard the car back out of the drive. I stood at the window for a long time after the sound of the engine faded, watching the dark street and the yellow circles of the street lamps and the bare branches of the elm tree I had planted the year Daniel was born. The fallout was not clean or quick. Those things never are. The house listing went up 6 weeks later. Renata called me twice to ask oblique questions she did not quite ask directly, which told me that the story was spreading through the social circles Elise had worked so carefully to inhabit. I did not contribute to the spread of it. I did not need to. Financial trouble is its own announcement. It speaks loudly without anyone having to raise a voice. Daniel and Elise moved into a rental apartment on the east side of the city. A 2-bedroom, from what I understood, which meant the children were sharing a room for the first time in their lives. I let myself feel that. I let it be uncomfortable, the way you press on a bruise to remind yourself it is real. My pride had consequences that reached further than my pride. The business negotiation with Victor took 11 weeks and produced an agreement I did not love but accepted, a structured repayment over 4 years, secured against the business assets, with quarterly reporting reinstated. Victor thought it was reasonable given the alternatives. I thought it was what the documents required and nothing more. Elise did not speak to me during those 11 weeks. Not a word, not a text. Daniel sent 3 messages, one angry, one formal, one short and tired, that I answered briefly and practically. I was not cruel. I was not warm. I responded to questions about practical matters, and I did not invite anything further. My flaw had done its work and also its damage. I had been precise, and I had been effective, and I had protected myself, and made them feel the weight of what they had taken for granted. I had also not spoken to my grandchildren in 11 weeks. That was the part I had not looked at directly when I was drawing up documents with Victor in his warm, book-lined office. I had looked away from that part. I told myself Mila and Lucas were resilient. I told myself children adjust. I told myself this was a problem Daniel and Elise had created, and they would need to solve it. I told myself a great many clean, logical things while my phone sat silent, and no small voice came through it asking when they were coming to my house for dinner. The drawing arrived on a Tuesday morning in an envelope with no return address but Lucas's large, looping handwriting on the front, each letter a separate careful project. Inside was a piece of paper torn from a spiral notebook, the edge still slightly ragged. The drawing was in crayon red and brown and yellow, a table with plates on it, steam rising in small loops from the plates. Around the table were 3 figures sitting down. And standing outside, visible through a window drawn as a simple square in the corner, was a 4th figure. Alone, looking in. On the back, in Mila's handwriting, 9 years old and already precise, "We miss your food." Then underneath, in Lucas's hand, "And you." I sat at my kitchen table with the drawing, and I did not move for a long time. I am not going to tell you I forgave everything in that moment. That would not be true, and I do not have patience for stories that sand the edges off of what is real. What happened was smaller and more complicated than forgiveness. What happened was that something inside me, the part that had been keeping score in the dark for years, the part that replayed the sound of ceramic hitting the inside of a trash bin until the sound had worn a groove in my memory, that part gave way slightly. Not all at once. Not completely, but something shifted. I thought about Elise, and I thought about the fear I had seen in her face when she understood the full shape of what was happening. I thought about a woman who has spent her entire life running from where she started, running so hard and so long that she had stopped being able to feel the ground under her feet. I did not excuse what she had done. I did not pretend the contempt she had shown me was a mistake born of exhaustion. It was not. It was a habit of many years, and it had been made freely. But I understood it in a way I had not let myself understand it before. I thought about Daniel, my son, my boy with the uneven collar and the flat, rehearsed voice on a Thursday evening who had finally, in my sitting room, said the thing he should have said before, not to me but to Elise. He had stood there in the moment that mattered and been smaller than he should have been. But he had also been in my sitting room that night, had he not? He had come. He was 42 years old and frightened, and he had come to his mother's house, and he had not sent anyone in his place. I thought about myself. I thought about 3 days of cooking and a dish towel, and the cold air outside and my phone buzzing with the transfer cancellation. I thought about pride wearing the mask of dignity, and dignity wearing the mask of silence, and silence as a weapon I had used cleanly and with intention. I thought about how long I had been keeping score. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but something hard and immovable had cracked. I put the drawing on my kitchen table where I could see it from the chair where I drank my morning tea. I did not put it away. I let it stay there, crayon steam rising from crayon plates, and I looked at it every morning, and I let it do what it needed to do. 3 days later I sent Daniel a text message. It said, "Sunday, 3 o'clock, I'll cook." He did not reply for 4 hours, then his message came. It said, "We'll be there." I went to the market the next morning and I bought what I needed. Good meat, real stock, garlic in full heads, not already peeled, the kind of ingredients that require time and attention and do not apologize for being what they are. I cooked for 2 days. On Sunday at 2:45, a car pulled into my driveway. I heard the doors open and then I heard feet on the gravel, small feet, running, and a voice I had not heard in 11 weeks calling my name with the particular urgency of a child who has been waiting a long time to say it. I opened the door. Lucas ran into me with his full small weight and wrapped his arms around my waist and pressed his face against my coat. Mila was one step behind him, more composed, her mother's daughter in some ways, but her eyes were bright and she was holding something, a piece of paper, folded in quarters. "I made another one," she said, "for the table this time, not outside." I took the drawing from her and held it in one hand, and kept my other hand on Lucas's back and looked over their heads at Daniel, who was standing at the bottom of my porch steps with his hands in his jacket pockets, and the particular expression of a man who does not know which version of himself to present, and has decided simply to be present. Behind him, one step back and to the right, was Elise. She was not looking at me with contempt. She was not doing the thing with her nose or her eyebrows. She was looking at the ground and then at her children and then briefly at me, with an expression I did not have a word for. It was not warm. It was not an apology exactly, but it was stripped of the layer of careful disdain that had always been between us, and what was underneath it was just a person. Flawed and frightened, and trying to calculate the distance between where she stood and where she was allowed to stand. "Come in," I said. She came in. We did not speak much that first Sunday. We ate. The children talked enough for everyone, the way children do, filling the air with the small urgent news of their lives, a project at school, a found beetle, a disagreement about something Lucas remembered differently than Mila did. Daniel ate 2 full plates and said the food was good in a voice that held something more than the words. Elise ate carefully and said nothing offensive and nothing warm. It was a beginning of something, not a resolution, not forgiveness wrapped up clean. A first Sunday, an opening, the kind of thing that might become something or might not, depending on what all of us were willing to do with it. After they left, I stood at my kitchen sink washing the plates, and I thought about the woman I had been 3 days ago, and the woman I had been 11 weeks ago, and the woman I had been that day in the doorway with a dish towel in my hands. I thought about the particular cruelty of loving someone whose capacity for love has been narrowed by fear and performance. I thought about the cruelty that lives inside precision, inside keeping score, inside the pride that dresses itself as dignity. I am Lydia Petrov, I am 67 years old. I came from nothing and I built something, and I love my people through labor, because it is the language I was given, and that language has limits I have spent a lifetime pretending it does not have. I am capable of great patience and great cold, and I do not always know the difference between justice and punishment until I am standing in the aftermath of one looking at the shape of the other. The drawing was still on my kitchen table, crayon steam rising from crayon plates, a figure through a window standing outside. I folded it gently and placed it in the drawer where I keep things that matter, not to forget them, but to keep them close. The things that cracked me open a little, the things that reminded me that scorekeeping is a kind of prison, and that the warden and the prisoner are sometimes the same person. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but the door was open now, and light was coming through it, and I was standing in it rather than outside it for the first time in a very long time, and that, imperfect and incomplete as it was something worth cooking for.